The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty mercantile, and Natalie Porter pressed her face against the window, searching for the man who had promised her a new life in his letters. But all she saw was empty boardwalk and the scorching Colorado sun beating down onGunnison's Main Street. Her feet throbbed inside her worn boots. Each step from Boston to this remote mountain town in the summer of 1878 having added another layer of pain to already tender flesh. She had walked when the stage broke down outside of Kansas City, walked when her meager funds ran dry in Denver, and walked the final 10 miles when the driver refused to take her the last stretch without payment. The soles of her feet felt like raw meat wrapped in leather, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out as she stepped down onto the packed earth. "You the mail-order bride for Samuel Winters?" the stage driver asked, spitting tobacco juice onto the ground. "I am," Natalie said, smoothing her threadbare traveling dress and trying to look presentable despite the dust caking every inch of her. "Well, I got bad news for you, miss. Sam Winters died 3 weeks back. Horse threw him and broke his neck." The words hit her like a physical blow. Natalie gripped the side of the stagecoach to steady herself, her vision swimming. Everything she owned was in the small carpetbag at her feet. Everything she had left behind was ash and memory, and the man who had promised her a home was dead. "I see," she managed to say, though her voice sounded far away to her own ears. "Is there perhaps a boarding house where I might stay while I figure out what to do?" The driver scratched his beard and looked uncomfortable. "Martha Green runs one, but she'll want payment up front. You got money?" Natalie had exactly 47 cents to her name. "I will find work." "Suit yourself," the driver said, already climbing back onto his seat. "Martha's place is down the street, blue building with the white shutters." As the stagecoach pulled away, Natalie picked up her bag and forced herself to walk despite the agony shooting through her feet with each step. The summer heat was oppressive, trapped between the mountains that surrounded Gunnison on all sides. She could see miners and cowboys moving along the street, horses tied to hitching posts, and women in bonnets hurrying about their business. None of them looked at her twice, just another dusty traveler in a town that saw plenty of them. The boarding house was exactly where the driver had indicated, and Martha Green turned out to be a severe woman with iron gray hair and suspicious eyes. "I need a room," Natalie said. "I can pay you as soon as I find work." "I do not run a charity," Martha said, looking Natalie up and down with clear disapproval. "You got any skills?" "I can sew, cook, clean, keep books. I worked in a textile factory in Boston before I came here." "Before you came here to marry Sam Winters, you mean?" Martha's expression softened slightly. "I heard about that. Bad luck that, but bad luck does not pay my bills." "Please," Natalie said, and hated the desperation in her voice. "Just one night. I will find something tomorrow, I promise." Martha studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "One night. But you are out first thing in the morning if you cannot pay, and you will help with dinner and washing up tonight to earn your keep." "Thank you," Natalie said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you so much." The room was tiny, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it had a door that closed and a window that looked out on the mountains, and after weeks of traveling, it felt like paradise. Natalie set down her bag and slowly, carefully, removed her boots. The leather had rubbed her stockings to shreds, and when she peeled those away, she saw that her feet were covered in blisters, some burst and weeping, others swollen and angry red. The calluses that had formed over years of standing at factory looms had cracked and split from the constant walking. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and lowered her feet into it, gasping at the sting. The water quickly turned pink with blood and dirt. She sat there on the edge of the bed, too exhausted to even cry, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. A knock at the door made her jump. "Dinner in 10 minutes, Martha called. "Do not be late." Natalie dried her feet as gently as she could and forced them back into her boots, biting her lip hard enough to taste blood. She made her way downstairs, each step a fresh torture, and helped Martha serve stew to the handful of boarders who lived there. They were mostly miners, rough men with weathered faces who ate quickly and spoke little. But there was one man at the end of the table who caught her attention because he kept glancing at her with what looked like concern rather than the indifference or lewd interest she had grown used to. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and green eyes that seemed kind despite the hard line of his jaw. He wore dusty range clothes and had the lean, weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. "You all right, miss?" he asked when she stumbled slightly while carrying the water pitcher. "You look like you are about to fall over." "I am fine," Natalie said automatically, though she could feel sweat beading on her forehead from the effort of staying upright. "Leave her be, Lucas," Martha said. "She has had a hard journey, that is all. Lucas Emerson." Natalie filed the name away without quite knowing why it mattered. She finished serving the meal and then ate her own portion standing in the kitchen, too tired to sit and then have to stand again. When she finally made it back to her room, she collapsed on the bed fully dressed and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing and the realization that she had exactly one day to find employment or she would be sleeping in the street. Her feet had stiffened during the night, and putting weight on them brought tears to her eyes, but she washed her face, tidied her hair as best she could, and went downstairs to help Martha with breakfast. "There is a woman looking for a seamstress," Martha said while Natalie was washing dishes. "Dorothy Chen, she runs the dress shop on 2nd Street. Chinese woman, married to a white man, which some folks around here have opinions about, but she does good work and she is decent. You might try there." "Thank you," Natalie said. "I will go as soon as I finish here." But before she could leave, Lucas Emerson appeared in the kitchen doorway. In the morning light, Natalie could see that he was younger than she had first thought, probably only 25 or 26 to her 22 years. He held his hat in his hands and looked uncharacteristically nervous. "Miss, I hope you will pardon the intrusion, but I could not help but notice last night that you were having trouble walking. Are you injured?" Natalie felt her cheeks burn. "That is very kind of you to notice, but I assure you I am quite all right." "Forgive me for being blunt, but you do not look all right. You look like you are in considerable pain." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "I have some experience with horses and cattle, and I know what it looks like when a creature has been driven too hard and too long. I mean no disrespect, miss, but I think you need help." Something about his earnest concern, the way he looked at her like she was a person rather than an inconvenience or an opportunity, made Natalie's careful composure crack. "My feet," she admitted quietly. "I walked a great deal of the way here, and they are rather the worse for wear." Lucas's expression darkened. "The stage line made you walk. The stage broke down, and then I ran out of money. These things happen." "These things should not happen to anyone," he said firmly. "Look, I have a small ranch about 3 miles outside of town. Nothing fancy, just some cattle and horses, but I have a spare room and I am a decent cook. I also have a medical kit and some salve that works wonders on injuries. Would you allow me to help you?" Natalie stared at him, trying to determine if this was genuine kindness or something more sinister. She had learned in Boston that men rarely offered help without expecting something in return. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I could not possibly impose on you in such a manner. We have only just met." "That is fair," Lucas said, But at least let me tend to your feet before you go walking all over town looking for work. Martha, do you have somewhere, miss?" He looked at Natalie expectantly. "Porter. Natalie Porter." "Somewhere Miss Porter could sit comfortably while I get my medical supplies from the ranch." Martha was watching this exchange with interest. "She can use the parlor. Nobody is in there this time of day." "I really do not think this is necessary," Natalie protested, but Lucas was already heading for the door. "I will be back within the hour," he said. "Please, Miss Porter, do not go anywhere until I return." After he left, Martha gave Natalie a long, measuring look. Lucas Emerson is one of the few truly good men I have met in my 63 years on this earth. His word is solid, and he has never shown anything but respect to women. If he says he wants to help, he means it with no strings attached. Though I will say, he has never shown this much interest in anyone since I have known him, and that is going on 4 years now. "I am just a charity case," Natalie said, though something warm had kindled in her chest at Martha's words. "Maybe. But Lucas has passed by plenty of charity cases without a second glance. Something about you has caught his attention." Natalie did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Martha led her to the parlor, a small room with 2 chairs and a threadbare sofa, and told her to sit and stay off her feet. Natalie obeyed, grateful for the chance to rest even as she worried about the time she was losing in her search for employment. Lucas returned in less than an hour as promised, carrying a leather satchel. He had also brought a basin and several clean cloths, which he set down near the sofa where Natalie sat. "This might seem improper," he said, "but I promise you my only intention is to help. Would you allow me to tend to your feet?" Every instinct Natalie had told her to refuse, to maintain her dignity and propriety, but the pain was so constant and so overwhelming that she found herself nodding. "All right." Lucas knelt on the floor in front of the sofa and carefully helped her remove her boots. When he peeled away her stockings, she heard his sharp intake of breath. "Miss Porter, how long have you been walking on feet in this condition?" "A while," she admitted. "I had to get here somehow." He did not say anything else, just filled the basin with water from the pitcher he had brought and gently lifted her feet into it. The water was warm but not hot, and he had added something to it that smelled of herbs and made the stinging ease almost immediately. "This is a mixture my mother taught me," Lucas said quietly, his hands steady and gentle as he began to carefully wash away the dirt and dried blood. "Comfrey and calendula mostly, with some other things. It helps with healing." Natalie watched him work, this stranger who knelt at her feet with such care, and felt something shift inside her chest. In all her 22 years, no one had ever treated her with such tenderness. Her father had died when she was young, and her mother had worked herself to death in the factories. The other workers had been too focused on their own survival to spare kindness for anyone else. Samuel Winters's letters had been kind enough, but they had been just words on paper, and now he was dead, and she was alone in a strange place with calloused, bleeding feet and 47 cents to her name. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas looked up at her, water dripping from his hands. "Because you need help and I can give it. Does there need to be another reason?" "In my experience, yes." Something sad flickered across his face. "I am sorry that has been your experience. But I promise you, Miss Porter, I want nothing from you except to know that you are in less pain than you were this morning." He returned his attention to her feet, working with infinite patience to clean each blister, each cracked callus, each raw spot. When the water in the basin grew too dirty, he replaced it with clean water from the pitcher. Then he dried her feet with a soft cloth and began applying a salve that cooled the burning and made her sigh with relief. "This will help them heal," he said, wrapping her feet in clean bandages. "But you should not walk on them any more than absolutely necessary for at least a few days. They need time to recover." "I have to find work," Natalie said. "Martha has already been more than generous, but I cannot stay here without paying, and I have no money." Lucas sat back on his heels, thinking. "What kind of work are you looking for? Anything, really. Martha mentioned a dress shop that might need a seamstress. Dorothy Chen's place. She is good people." He paused, then seemed to come to a decision. "Miss Porter, I know we have only just met, and I know this is going to sound forward, but I have a proposition for you. A proper one," he added hastily, seeing her expression. "I need help at the ranch. Someone to keep house, do the cooking, maybe help with the bookkeeping if you are any good with figures. The work is not easy, but it would be honest employment with room and board included and a fair wage. Nothing fancy, mind you, but enough to start building some savings." Natalie stared at him. "You are offering me a job, just like that, just like that. Though I will admit it is not entirely selfless. I am terrible at cooking, the house is a disaster, and I have been putting off the bookkeeping for months because I hate doing it. You would actually be doing me a considerable favor. But you do not know anything about me. I could be a terrible cook. I could steal from you. Could you?" Natalie met his eyes. "No, I could not." "Then I guess I will take my chances." He stood and offered her his hand. "What do you say, Miss Porter? Would you be willing to come work for me? I can promise you fair treatment, honest work, and all the time you need for your feet to heal properly." It was madness. She did not know this man, did not know if his ranch even existed, did not know if this was all some elaborate scheme. But when she looked into his green eyes, she saw only sincerity and a quiet kindness that made her want to cry. "All right," she said, taking his hand. "I accept your offer." Lucas's face broke into a smile that transformed him from merely handsome to genuinely beautiful. "Good. That is really good. When can you start?" "I suppose as soon as my feet will carry me that far." "No walking for you," Lucas said firmly. "I will bring the wagon around tomorrow morning and collect you and your things. That will give you another day to rest here." He looked toward the door where Martha was conspicuously dusting the same shelf for the third time. "Mrs. Green, would it be acceptable for Miss Porter to stay one more night? I will pay her board." "That will not be necessary," Martha said, abandoning all pretense of not listening. "Consider it my wedding gift to you both." "We are not getting married," Natalie said quickly, feeling her cheeks burn. "Not yet," Martha said with a knowing smile. "But mark my words, Lucas Emerson does not go to this much trouble for just anyone." Lucas had the grace to look embarrassed, but he did not contradict her. Instead, he gathered up his supplies and headed for the door. "I will be back tomorrow morning, Miss Porter. Try to rest, and keep those bandages clean and dry." After he left, Natalie sat in the parlor feeling like she had just stepped off a cliff and was waiting to see if she would fly or fall. Martha settled into the chair across from her with her knitting. "You made a good choice," the older woman said. "Lucas's ranch is modest but well kept. He works hard, treats his animals well, and he has never given anyone cause to doubt his character. His mother passed about 2 years ago and his father a few years before that. He has been alone out there since, and I think the loneliness has been hard on him, though he would never say so. You seem to know him well. He stays here whenever he comes to town for supplies. Always pays on time, always respectful, always willing to help if I need something heavy moved or a repair done. He is a good man, Natalie. They are rare out here, but he is one of them." Natalie wanted to believe that. She wanted it so badly it frightened her. What if I am a terrible housekeeper? What if he regrets hiring me? Then you will figure it out together. But something tells me you are more capable than you give yourself credit for. Martha's needles clicked steadily. "Now, Tell me about Boston and how you ended up on a stage to Colorado to marry a man you had never met." So Natalie told her. She told her about growing up in the tenements, about working 14-hour days in the textile mill from the time she was 12, about her mother coughing herself to death from the lint and chemicals they breathed every day. She told her about the fire that had destroyed the factory and left her without work, about seeing the advertisement for mail-order brides and thinking that anything had to be better than the grinding poverty she knew. She told her about Samuel Winters's letters, which had been kind and literate, and had painted a picture of a quiet life in the mountains that had seemed like a dream. "And now he is dead and I am here, and I do not know what I am doing," Natalie finished. "None of us ever know what we are doing," Martha said. "We just keep putting one foot in front of the other and hope it leads somewhere good. Though in your case, I suggest you keep those feet still for now and let them heal." Natalie laughed despite herself. That seems to be the prevailing opinion. She spent the rest of the day helping Martha with light tasks that did not require much walking, and that evening at dinner, she noticed Lucas's empty place at the table and felt an odd sense of disappointment. She told herself it was ridiculous to miss someone she barely knew, but the feeling persisted anyway. That night, she lay in the narrow bed and tried to imagine what her life would be like on Lucas's ranch. She had never lived anywhere but the city, had never seen a cow up close, had certainly never kept house for a cowboy in the Colorado mountains. But she thought about his gentle hands washing her feet, the way he had looked at her with such earnest concern, and decided that perhaps this unexpected turn of events was not the disaster she had first thought. Morning came too quickly and too slowly at once. Natalie woke early and packed her few belongings, then helped Martha prepare breakfast even though the older woman scolded her for not staying off her feet. The bandages Lucas had applied were still clean and white, and the pain had subsided from agony to a dull ache that was almost bearable. She was finishing the dishes when she heard the sound of wagon wheels outside. Her heart started beating faster, and she told herself it was just nerves about starting a new job, nothing more. Lucas came to the door dressed in clean clothes, his hair damp like he had recently washed. He smiled when he saw her, and that warm feeling kindled in her chest again. "Morning, Miss Porter. How are your feet feeling today?" "Much better, thank you. Your salve worked wonders. Good. Are you ready to see your new home?" Martha appeared with Natalie's carpet bag. "You take care of her, Lucas Emerson, or you will answer to me." "Yes, madam," Lucas said solemnly. "I will guard her with my life." "I do not need guarding," Natalie protested, but no one seemed to be listening. Lucas helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hands steady at her waist, and she tried not to notice how her skin tingled where he touched her even through the layers of fabric. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, and Martha stood on the porch waving as they pulled away. The morning was cool and clear, the sun just beginning to warm the air, and the mountains rose up all around them like ancient sentinels. Natalie had never seen anything like them. In Boston, the tallest things had been the factory smokestacks and the church steeples. Here the world seemed vast and wild and full of possibilities. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Lucas glanced at her, pleased. "It is. I have been to Denver a few times, even went to St. Louis once, and I could not wait to get back here. This land gets into your blood." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking and the horses' hooves clopping steadily. The road followed a river that ran clear and cold, and Natalie could see fish darting in the shallows. "Tell me about your ranch," she said eventually. "It is not much," Lucas said. "About 200 acres, with maybe 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses. I do some breaking and training on the side, selling horses to the army and to ranchers who need good working stock." The house is small, just 3 rooms, but it is solid. My father built it when he first came here in '68, right after the war. Your father fought in the war, Union Army. He never talked about it much, but I think it marked him. He wanted to go somewhere peaceful after, somewhere far from cities and battlefields. He found it here. Lucas's voice was soft with memory. He taught me everything I know about ranching, about treating animals with respect, about how hard work is its own reward. He was a good man. And your mother, she was the daughter of a rancher from Wyoming. Strong, smart, could ride better than most men. She kept us all in line. He smiled, but there was sadness in it. She got pneumonia 2 winters ago. We got a doctor from town, but it was too late. She died holding my hand, telling me to find a good woman and not spend my life alone. I am sorry, Natalie said, and meant it. Me too. But I think she would have liked you. Natalie looked at him in surprise. You cannot possibly know that. You barely know me yourself. I know you were brave enough to travel halfway across the country alone. I know you walked on ruined feet because you had no other choice. I know you did not complain or make a fuss, just kept going. That takes strength, Miss Porter. My mother respected strength. Natalie did not know what to say to that, so she looked out at the passing landscape and tried to ignore the way her heart was beating too fast. The ranch appeared around a bend in the road, and Natalie's first thought was that it looked like something from a painting. The house was small, as Lucas had said, built of logs with a wide porch and a stone chimney. There was a barn that was bigger than the house, several corrals, and a smaller building that Lucas explained was the bunkhouse, though he had no hands working for him currently. I usually manage on my own, he said, helping her down from the wagon. But during roundup and branding, I hire a few men from town to help out. He carried her bag to the house and opened the door, then stepped back to let her enter first. The interior was dim and cool, and as her eyes adjusted, Natalie saw that it was exactly as he had described. One large main room served as kitchen and living area, with a fireplace taking up most of one wall and a cookstove in the corner. There was a scrubbed wooden table, a few mismatched chairs, and shelves lined with supplies. 2 doors led off the main room. That is my bedroom, Lucas said, pointing to one. And that is the spare room. It was my mother's sewing room, but I moved her things out last night and set up a proper bed for you. It is not fancy, but it is clean and private. Natalie opened the door and found a small room with a single bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple and spare, but it was more than she had dared to hope for. It is perfect, she said. Thank you. Lucas looked relieved. Good. I am glad you like it. Now, let me show you around the rest of the place, and then we can discuss your duties and wages. He gave her a tour of the property, showing her the barn where the horses nickered and stamped in their stalls, the chicken coop where hens scratched in the dirt, the smokehouse and the root cellar and the well with its hand pump. He pointed out where the cattle grazed in the distance and explained his plans for expanding the herd. The territory is growing fast, he said. More people coming in all the time means more demand for beef and horses. If I can build up the ranch over the next few years, I will be in a good position. It sounds like you have thought this through carefully. I have been thinking about it since my father died. He wanted me to have something lasting, something I could be proud of. I am trying to honor that. They returned to the house, and Lucas showed her where he kept the supplies, how the cookstove worked, where he stored the feed for the animals. Then he sat down at the table and pulled out a small leather-bound ledger. I am not very good with numbers, he admitted. I know what I spend and what I earn, but keeping it all organized is beyond me. If you could make sense of this mess, I would be grateful. Natalie opened the ledger and saw page after page of cramped, uneven handwriting with numbers that sometimes added up and sometimes did not. She had to bite back a smile. "I think I can manage this, thank the Lord. Now about wages. I can pay you $20 a month plus room and board. That is what I would pay a hired hand, and you will be working just as hard. If that is not acceptable, we can negotiate. $20 a month." It was more than she had made at the factory, and with no rent or food costs, she could actually save money. "That is more than fair. Then we have a deal." Lucas offered his hand, and Natalie shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm that spoke of years of hard work. His grip was firm but not crushing, and he held her hand for just a moment longer than necessary before letting go. "When would you like me to start? How about tomorrow? You should rest today, let your feet continue healing. I will handle the animals and bring in something for dinner." "Can you cook? Or was that an exaggeration to get Martha off your back?" Natalie laughed. "I can cook. Not fancy food, mind you, but I can make a decent stew, and I know my way around bread dough." "That is more than I can do. I mostly live on beans and bacon." "Then I think we will both benefit from this arrangement." Lucas smiled at her, and Natalie felt that warmth in her chest again, stronger this time. She told herself it was just gratitude, just relief at finding safety and employment, but she was starting to suspect it might be something more. The rest of the day passed quietly. Lucas worked outside while Natalie explored the house, taking inventory of the supplies and making mental lists of what she would need. Her feet were tired by evening, but nothing like the constant agony she had endured before. She changed the bandages as Lucas had shown her and applied more salve, marveling at how much difference one day could make. When Lucas came in for dinner, he had 3 rabbits he had snared, already cleaned and ready to cook. Natalie had found potatoes and carrots in the root cellar and some herbs growing wild near the house, and she made a simple but hearty stew that filled the house with good smells. They ate at the table as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed impossible. Lucas told her about the horses he was training and the cattle he was raising, and Natalie found herself genuinely interested, asking questions and learning about this new world she had entered. "You are a good listener," Lucas said as they were cleaning up. "Most people do not really care about the details of ranching." "I care about understanding my new home," Natalie said. "And besides, you make it interesting. You clearly love what you do." "I do. This land, this life, it is all I have ever wanted." "Some people dream of cities and civilization, but I would rather be here with the cattle and horses, working with my hands, building something that matters." "That is a good dream," Natalie said softly. That night, lying in her new bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the countryside at night, Natalie thought about Lucas Emerson and his gentle hands and his kind eyes. She thought about the way he had knelt before her and washed her feet like it was a sacred duty, the way he had looked at her like she mattered. She had come to Colorado to marry a stranger, and instead she had found a different stranger who was beginning to feel less strange with every passing hour. She did not let herself think the word love. It was too soon, too foolish, too dangerous. But as she drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected turn of events was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Natalie rose early to make breakfast, and Lucas taught her how to collect eggs from the chickens without getting pecked, how to milk the cow he kept for their own use, how to tell when bread dough had risen enough. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized his chaotic supplies, and started making sense of his bookkeeping disaster. Her feet healed slowly but steadily. Lucas changed her bandages every evening with the same gentle care he had shown that first day. And Natalie found herself looking forward to these quiet moments when he knelt before her and asked about her day while his hands worked carefully over her healing skin. "They are looking much better," he said one evening about 2 weeks after her arrival. "The blisters have mostly healed and the calluses are not as cracked. How do they feel?" "Almost normal," Natalie admitted. "A little tender still, but nothing like before." "Good. That is really good." But Lucas did not immediately release her feet. Instead, he continued to hold them gently, his thumbs tracing small circles on her ankles. "Natalie, can I tell you something?" Her breath caught at his use of her first name. They had been calling each other Miss Porter and Mr. Emerson all this time, maintaining a careful formality despite the growing ease between them. "Of course. I have been thinking about what you said that first day, about how people do not help without expecting something in return. I want you to know that I truly did not have any ulterior motives when I offered you this job, but I would be lying if I said my feelings had not changed over these past weeks." Natalie's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Changed how?" Lucas looked up at her, and the expression in his green eyes made her breath stop entirely. "I find myself thinking about you constantly. When I am out with the cattle, I am wondering what you are cooking for dinner. When I am breaking a horse, I am imagining telling you about it later. When I lie in bed at night, I am thinking about how your voice sounds when you laugh, how your hair catches the light when you are working in the kitchen, how brave and strong you are." "Lucas," she whispered, not knowing what else to say. "I know it is too soon. I know you came here planning to marry someone else. I know you might not feel the same way, but my mother told me not to spend my life alone, and I do not want to. Not if there is a chance that you might feel even a fraction of what I feel for you." Natalie slid off the chair and onto the floor beside him, ignoring the protest from her not quite healed feet. She took his face in her hands and looked directly into his eyes. "Lucas Emerson, I have been half in love with you since the moment you knelt before me and washed my feet. I told myself it was too fast, too foolish, too impossible. But the truth is, I have never felt safer or more valued than I do here with you. So yes, I feel the same way, more than a fraction, much more." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "Really, really." He kissed her then, soft and careful and sweet, and Natalie felt like she was finally, truly home. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard and Lucas was grinning like a fool. "I want to do this properly," he said. "I want to court you, take you to town for dinner, introduce you to people as the woman I am falling in love with. And then, if you will have me, I want to marry you and spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to walk on bleeding feet again. I want to give you rest, Natalie. Real rest, the kind that comes from knowing you are loved and safe and home." Tears were streaming down Natalie's face, but she was smiling. "That sounds perfect, all of it." "Then it is settled." Lucas stood and pulled her up with him, keeping his arm around her waist. "Though I suppose we should maintain separate rooms until the wedding, for propriety's sake." "Probably wise," Natalie agreed, though part of her wanted to throw propriety out the window. The next months were the happiest of Natalie's life. Lucas courted her properly, driving her into Gunnison on Saturday afternoons for dinners at the hotel restaurant, introducing her to the townspeople as his intended. Some of them remembered that she had come to marry Samuel Winters, but most seemed genuinely happy for Lucas, saying it was about time he found someone. Dorothy Chen at the dress shop became a fast friend, insisting on making Natalie a proper wedding dress at cost because, as she said, any woman brave enough to travel alone to Colorado and wise enough to fall for Lucas Emerson deserved to look beautiful on her wedding day. Natalie learned to ride horses, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence. Lucas was a patient teacher, never pushing her beyond what she was comfortable with, always there to steady her when she wobbled. She learned to help with the cattle, to mend fences, to tell when a horse was sick or just ornery. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Natalie's bookkeeping revealed several opportunities for savings and better organization, and the house became a true home, warm and welcoming with curtains on the windows and flowers in mason jars on the table. They were married on a crisp October morning in 1878, 4 months after Natalie had arrived in Gunnison. Martha Green stood as Natalie's witness, and Lucas's closest friend, a rancher named Tom, stood as his. Dorothy Chen had outdone herself with the dress, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored silk that made Natalie feel like a princess. The ceremony was brief, conducted by the circuit preacher who came through Gunnison once a month. But when Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger and said his vows, Natalie felt the weight and truth of every word. "I promise to love you, to protect you, to give you rest when you are weary and strength when you falter. I promise to be your partner in all things, your soft place to land at the end of hard days. I promise that you will never again walk alone or in pain if I can prevent it. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Natalie's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you, to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to make our house a home, to be your comfort and your companion. I promise to honor the kindness you showed a broken stranger, and to spend my life showing you that your faith in me was not misplaced. This I swear before God and these witnesses." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and the small gathering of friends and townspeople cheered. The wedding breakfast at the hotel was simple but joyful, and when it was time to leave, Martha pulled Natalie aside and hugged her fiercely. "You have found a good man and made a good life," the older woman said. "I am proud of you, child." "Thank you for everything," Natalie said. "For giving me that first night, for believing in me. I just gave you a bed. You did the rest yourself." Lucas and Natalie drove back to the ranch in the golden afternoon light, and when they arrived, he lifted her down from the wagon and carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "You are supposed to do this," he insisted. "It is tradition." "I am too heavy. You are perfect." He set her down gently in the main room, and they stood there looking at each other, suddenly shy despite all the time they had spent together. "I love you," Lucas said softly. "I know I have said it before, but I want to say it now as your husband. I love you, Natalie Emerson." "I love you too," she said. "More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two people learning each other with patience and care. And afterward, lying in Lucas's arms in the bed they would now share, Natalie thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain, the fear, the exhausting walk across rough country with bleeding feet and an uncertain future. It had all led to this moment, to this man, to this love. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "That I would walk 1,000 miles on broken feet if it meant ending up here with you." He pulled her closer. "You never have to walk like that again. I promise you rest, remember? Forever." "Forever," Natalie agreed and closed her eyes in perfect contentment. The years that followed were good ones, filled with hard work and simple pleasures. The ranch continued to grow, and Lucas's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the territory. They hired 2 hands to help with the expanding operation, good men who respected Natalie and worked well with Lucas. Their first child came in the autumn of 1879, a healthy boy they named James after Lucas's father. Natalie labored through the night with Dorothy Chen and Martha Green attending her, and when she finally held her son in her arms, She wept with joy. Lucas was besotted, holding the tiny infant with such careful reverence that it made Natalie's heart swell. "He is perfect," Lucas kept saying. "You made him perfect." "We made him perfect," Natalie corrected. James was followed by a daughter in 1881, whom they named Rose after Lucas's mother. She had her father's green eyes and her mother's determination, and from the moment she could walk, she was toddling after Lucas to the barn, insisting on helping with the horses. In 1883, another boy arrived, whom they named Thomas but called Tommy from the start. He was quieter than his siblings, more thoughtful, and he loved numbers the way his mother did. By the time he was 5, he was helping Natalie with the ranch books, his little face serious as he copied figures into the ledger. The territory was changing around them. Colorado had achieved statehood in 1876, just 2 years before Natalie arrived, and Gunnison was growing from a rough mining camp into a proper town. The railroad reached them in 1881, making travel easier and markets more accessible. Lucas took advantage of this, shipping cattle and horses to Denver and even as far as Chicago. They prospered, but they never forgot where they had come from. Every winter, they took in drifters who needed work and a warm place to stay. Every summer, they hired young men from town who were trying to earn money for their own stakes. And every time Lucas went to town, he kept an eye out for people who looked lost or desperate, remembering the young woman who had stumbled off the stage with ruined feet and nowhere to go. One such person was a young widow named Sarah who arrived in 1887 with 2 small children and no money. Lucas and Natalie took her in without hesitation, giving her work as a housekeeper now that the ranch had grown too large for Natalie to manage alone. Sarah stayed for 3 years before marrying one of the ranch hands, and she never forgot the kindness shown to her. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Lucas surprised Natalie with a trip to Denver. They left the children with Martha Green, who was getting on in years but still sharp as ever, and spent a week in the city being tourists. Natalie had thought she might feel some nostalgia for urban life, some longing for the civilization she had left behind. But instead, she found herself counting the days until they could return to the ranch. The noise and crowds that had once been normal now felt overwhelming, and she missed the quiet of the mountains, the sound of cattle lowing, the sight of her children running through the meadow. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked on their last night in the city, as they sat in a fancy restaurant that seemed to think putting a tiny portion of food on an enormous plate was sophisticated. "I am more than all right," Natalie said. "I am just ready to go home." Lucas's smile was understanding. "Me too. I miss the kids something fierce, and I keep thinking about the horses, wondering if Tom is exercising them properly." "We have become completely domesticated," Natalie said with a laugh. 10 years ago, I would have thought a week in Denver was paradise." 10 years ago, you had just arrived in Gunnison to marry a dead man and your feet were bleeding. I think your standards have changed." "They certainly have." She reached across the table to take his hand. "Thank you for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." "Thank you for letting me," Lucas said. "Every day with you is a gift." They returned to the ranch to find that Martha had spoiled the children terribly, feeding them cookies and letting them stay up late to hear stories. James was 9 now, tall for his age and already showing signs of becoming a fine horseman like his father. Rose was 7, fearless and wild, always coming home with scraped knees and torn dresses. Tommy was 5, quiet and serious, already reading at a level far beyond his years. "They are good children," Martha said as she prepared to leave. "You and Lucas have done well." "We have tried," Natalie said, "though I think they mostly raise themselves and each other. The best ones always do. life continued in its pleasant rhythm. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Lucas and Natalie's love deepened into something rich and enduring. They had their difficulties, of course. There were hard winters when cattle died and money was tight. There were dry summers when the river ran low and the grass turned brown. There were illnesses and injuries, close calls and sleepless nights. But through it all, they had each other. Lucas never forgot his promise to give Natalie rest, and even in the busiest times he made sure she had moments of peace. He would send her to sit on the porch with a cup of coffee while he handled the children's breakfast. He would insist she ride into town with Dorothy for an afternoon of gossip and shopping while he managed things at home. He would rub her feet at the end of long days, just as he had done that first time, and tell her he loved her. Natalie, in turn, made sure Lucas knew he was valued and appreciated. She kept their home warm and welcoming, a refuge from the harsh world outside. She supported his decisions about the ranch and offered good counsel when he asked for it. She made sure he took time for himself, insisting he go fishing with Tom or ride into the mountains alone when she could see the weight of responsibility growing too heavy. In 1892, their fourth child arrived, another girl they named Catherine. She was a surprise, coming as she did when Rose was already 11 and Natalie had assumed her childbearing days were over. But she was a welcome surprise, a gentle soul who seemed to bring even more love into their already loving home. James left for college in Denver in 1893, planning to study agriculture so he could bring modern techniques back to the ranch. Lucas was proud but heartbroken to see his eldest son leave, and Natalie held him while he cried on that first night, understanding that his tears were joy and sorrow mixed together. Rose showed no interest in college, declaring she would rather work with horses than waste time on books. She had a natural gift for training that exceeded even Lucas's considerable skill, and by the time she was 16, ranchers were asking specifically for horses Rose Emerson had trained. Tommy did go to college, studying accounting in Denver, and coming back to completely overhaul the ranch's financial systems. Under his management, they became one of the most prosperous operations in the region, known for their quality cattle and horses and their fair dealing. Catherine was still young when the new century turned, but she showed signs of becoming a gifted artist, always drawing pictures of the horses and mountains and filling the house with color and life. Through it all, Lucas and Natalie remained devoted to each other. Their hair grayed, their faces lined, their bodies moved more slowly, but the love between them never dimmed. Lucas still washed Natalie's feet sometimes, a ritual that had become sacred between them, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, the children threw them a party that seemed to include half of Gunnison. The house was full of friends and neighbors, all of whom had stories about Lucas and Natalie's kindness, their generosity, their love. Martha Green, now in her 90s and moving slowly, pulled Natalie aside at one point. "I told you that first day that you made a good choice. I was right." "You were absolutely right," Natalie agreed. "Though I did not really choose, it felt more like fate. Maybe it was. Or maybe you were just brave enough to see a good thing when it was offered and wise enough to grab it with both hands. Maybe both." As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Lucas and Natalie stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. He had his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him, fitting against his side as perfectly as she always had. "You ever think about that day you arrived in Gunnison?" Lucas asked. "When you got off the stage to marry a dead man and could barely walk?" "Sometimes," Natalie admitted. "It feels like a different life, like it happened to someone else." I think about it all the time. I think about how close I came to never meeting you, how if I had not been staying at Martha's that particular week, how if I had not looked at you during dinner and seen how much pain you were in, we might never have spoken. It terrifies me. Natalie turned in his arms to face him. But we did meet. You did see me. And you kept your promise, Lucas. You gave me rest. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never dreamed existed. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much. Before you came, I was just going through the motions, working hard but never really living. You made this place a home. You made me whole. We made each other whole, Natalie said. That is how love works. Lucas kissed her then with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day and every day since. Here is to 25 more years. At least, Natalie agreed. They did not get quite 25 more years, but they got close. Lucas lived to see James take over management of the ranch, to see Rose marry a horse trainer from Wyoming and start her own operation, to see Tommy expand their business interests beyond anyone's expectations, and to see Catherine sell her first painting to a gallery in Denver. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1925 at the age of 72, lying beside Natalie in the bed they had shared for 47 years. She woke to find him gone, his hand still holding hers, his face peaceful and at rest. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe, but Natalie did not fall apart. She had their children and grandchildren around her, and she had a lifetime of memories to sustain her. She had the ranch that they had built together. Every fence post and barn bore a testament to their love and hard work. She lived another 5 years, spending her days with her children and grandchildren, teaching the young ones to cook and clean, telling them stories about their grandfather, and the day she arrived in Gunnison with bleeding feet and a broken heart. She told them about how he had knelt before her and washed her feet, how he had promised her rest, and how he had kept that promise every single day for 47 years. Natalie Emerson passed away in her sleep in 1930, surrounded by her family in the house Lucas had built, on the land they had loved. She was 74 years old, and she had lived a life full of love and purpose and meaning. They buried her next to Lucas on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a spreading pine tree where they had often sat together watching the sunset. The whole town turned out for the funeral, and person after person came forward to tell stories about Natalie and Lucas, about their kindness and generosity, about the way they had helped so many people over the years. James spoke for the family, his voice thick with emotion. My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling but an action. It is kneeling down to wash someone's feet when they are in pain. It is offering help to a stranger with no expectation of reward. It is keeping your promises even when it is hard. It is building a life together, one day at a time, with patience and care and devotion. They showed us what real love looks like, and we will spend the rest of our lives trying to live up to their example. The Emerson Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through James's line, and managed with the same care and integrity that Lucas and Natalie had shown. The story of how they met, of the mail-order bride with calloused feet and the cowboy who washed them and promised her rest forever, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and what mattered most. The house still stands today, modernized and expanded but still fundamentally the same building that Lucas's father built in 1868. If you visit on a quiet evening when the sun is setting over the mountains and the cattle are lowing softly in the distance, you can almost feel their presence there. Lucas and Natalie, forever young, forever in love, their story written into the very fabric of the land they called home. It was a love that began with an act of kindness, with calloused feet and gentle hands, with a promise made and kept. It was a love that built a family, a ranch, a legacy. It was a love that proved that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be, to exactly who we need to meet. And it was a love that, in the end, gave both of them the rest they deserved. Not the rest of idleness or inactivity, but the deep, soul-satisfying rest that comes from being known and loved, from building something meaningful, from spending every day with the person who feels like home. That summer evening in 1878, when Lucas Emerson knelt before Natalie Porter and washed her bleeding feet, he could not have known that he was beginning a love story that would span nearly 5 decades and shape countless lives. He was just a lonely cowboy seeing someone in pain and wanting to help. She was just a desperate young woman who had run out of options and found herself at the mercy of a stranger's kindness. But from that simple act of compassion grew a love that became legendary, a marriage that became a model, a life that became an inspiration. They proved that love does not always arrive with fanfare and drama, that sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of gentle hands and soft words and promises kept day after day after day. Lucas gave Natalie rest, just as he promised. And she gave him purpose and joy, and a reason to believe that loneliness did not have to be the cost of loving this wild, beautiful land. Together, they built something that lasted far beyond their own years, something that continues even now in the lives of their descendants and in the stories told about them. It was a love born in the Wild West, in a time and place where life was hard and uncertain, where people had to be strong just to survive. But it was also a love that proved that even in the harshest circumstances, kindness and compassion and genuine care for another person could create something beautiful and lasting. The mountains that surround Gunnison still stand guard over the valley, just as they did when Natalie first saw them in 1878. The river still runs clear and cold, and the sky still turns gold and pink at sunset. And somewhere in the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant sound of cattle on the hillsides, you can still hear the echo of a cowboy's promise and a bride's grateful acceptance, a promise of rest that became a lifetime of love.